That beautiful yard seemed like a big plus when you bought your house. Now you just want an end to the continual mowing, weeding, watering, and landscape maintenance. There are companies that can help if you pick the right ones. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
In this episode, we'll look at lawn care companies and why you may want to think twice before using one. Also, what to consider when hiring a company to landscape your property. And then for the do-it-yourselfers, what to expect from big-name garden centers when it comes to both price and quality. To help us with all this, Checkbook's executive editor, Kevin Brassler.
Hey, Herb, how are you?
Good. Sorry to pull you away from the garden. I know how much you like having your hands in the dirt, but this will be an important segment for everybody.
Yeah, everyone who knows me knows that I'm just not a big fan of having to do yard work. All that kneeling and stooping and, digging around in the dirt, getting your hands dirty is not for me. I raked leaves a few years ago and almost got a blister, so it's
oh my
not
God,
for
a
me.
Blister?
Yeah, it was tough. It was a tough day. But on the other hand, I've been researching and writing about lawn care and landscaping and projects like that for many years, speaking to companies that do great work and really drawing out for them the best way to hire a company and the ways to avoid trouble.
Well, we trust you. By the way, I like to dig around in the dirt. I like to do the pots on the back deck, the potted plants. So I turn my brain off and I garden. So that's what I do. But anyway, let's get into this right now. As everybody knows, there are companies that promise to keep your lawn lush and green, something, of course, you could do on your own. But a lot of people don't want to mess around with fertilizers and pesticides. So if you decide to go this route, where do you start to find a good company?
I think the first thing to do is meet with several companies. Have them send their representatives out because you'll learn a lot about what they will and won't do, what they can and can't do. And maybe most importantly, give you a chance to really assess whether at least the business owner or whoever they send is an expert. Our undercover shoppers find time and again that a lot of lawn care companies just don't know what they're doing. We've asked several to evaluate a specific lawn and recommend a treatment regimen. And when we do so, we rarely find agreement among them in terms of what's wrong and what's needed. And the differences are striking. And also, sometimes they just can't even measure the thing correctly. I mean, we had one lawn that was measured completely differently by different estimators, even that was really, obviously fenced off. And so a lot of these companies just so rarely get it right. Their estimators and even their workers can't really distinguish between different weed types or different pests and other problems. And their observations are wrong, and so their treatment protocols and recommendations are often wrong.
Well, it's probably because the business model for some of these big companies are the more you get, the better, and not necessarily in quality per each lawn, which leads me to the question, most lawn companies probably have a one-size-fits-all business model. They apply the same treatments on all the customers' lawns. That could be a problem, right?
Yeah, these lawn care companies, they'll often promise to have, tailored approaches to different lawns and only treat for pests when necessary and things like that. But most of them really just have a one-size-fits-all approach where they're treating lawns a certain number of times each year. All the lawns that they're working with get the same treatments. And so you're really not getting this kind of, if I don't need a certain pesticide or a certain herbicide or even fertilizer applied, well, no, you're going to get it anyways, and you're going to get billed for it several times a year, whether you really needed it or not.
And of course, if you're getting a lot of fertilizer on that lawn, you're going to need more water and you're going to do a lot more mowing. So you got to think about that too.
Yeah, and I think in general, an important thing to do when you're meeting with these companies is communicate up front what your expectations are. If you can live with some bare spots, if you can live with some weeds here and there, then make sure they know that, because in your case, you may not need so much more treatment as others. You may still get it if they have a one-size-fits-all approach, but at least discussing this up front, you might be able to save. So, for example, most lawns really only need to be fertilized once or twice a year. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, in my case, for example, I don't care about bare spots. I don't care about during the summer when grasses around here in the Washington area go dormant, they go brown. That doesn't matter to me. I don't want to have to water my lawn continuously throughout the summer, for example, to keep it green, because I just don't want the waste, right? I don't want to waste water, and I don't want to waste money on watering a lawn that's going to bounce back.
Sure.
So it's important to talk to these lawn care companies about what it is you want from them. If you're thinking about hiring a lawn care service, you're probably of the mind that you do want a nice, green, thick, lush lawn. And so tell them, this is when I expect that to happen. I'm hoping you can make that happen by a certain time. Just know that it might require more water from you, right? It might require more attention from you than before.
And you should probably ask them what kind of fertilizers they're going to use, synthetic, organic, whatever, if that matters to you.
Yeah, and especially if you're thinking about, you don't want synthetic fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides sprayed. Talk to them about that up front. It's good to communicate up front what your expectations are. Most of these lawn care services these days have what they'll call them natural or organic programs. And so they do have kind of a different approach if you ask for that. But it's important to really kind of pull out from them and discover, what does that mean? Because it's a very loose term. It's not like produce when you buy it at the supermarket. The term organic has a certain meaning. Mm-hmm. The USDA has assigned a certain meaning to that, and the people who are producing organic fruits and vegetables have to abide by certain standards. But that's not the case for lawn care. And so a lot of these companies will say they have natural programs, but they're not probably as robust and as rigorously kind of monitored as you hope. You also need to realize with these natural programs that the fertilizers they're using, instead of using synthetic fertilizers, they're using organic ones, and they're not as effective, and so they have to add them in more bulk. They're applying more volume of fertilizer to your lawn, and that means that more stuff can actually run off into the waterways, and that's not good either. These organic fertilizers can be just as harmful to the waterways as synthetics.
Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here, but I bet if I got a couple of estimates from different lawn care services, I'd get a wide range of prices. Do you think that's right?
We find huge price differences from company to company to treat the same lawn. It's hard to compare apples to apples with these companies because they do sometimes have different approaches. But when our undercover shoppers have said, look, I want a nice, thick, green, lush lawn, and I want that to happen within a year or so, we still see huge price differences from company to company for the exact, same lawn and in theory, the same type of work. And we're talking about some charge $1,000 to $2,000 more per year than others. And you cannot assume that the lower priced companies do lousy work. That's sometimes true, but what we find is there's really no relationship between quality and price when it comes to lawn care work.
Do these companies require you to sign up for an annual program? Do you have to make a major commitment if you're going to hire one of them?
So some do and some don't. If you're thinking, hey, I just want you to apply fertilizer once a year and do some seeding and maybe a core aeration process, which kind of loosens up the compacted soil, a lot of companies will be willing to do a one-shot thing, but most of them, they want to tie you into an annual contract that will auto-renew. So they'll just keep coming unless you tell them to stop.
With a lot of the services we talk about, we go over guarantees. Is there any kind of guarantee with these lawn services?
So most of them have a guarantee, but their guarantee is that, hey, we'll come back and redo a treatment if you're not happy, which is kind of a strange guarantee. They're going to over-fertilize my lawn and burn it off, right? So that's not good enough. A good guarantee is if they'll say in writing that they'll refund all your money for the year if you're not happy with results, or that they'll just continue service for free until you are happy. The good news is a lot of companies will offer you that guarantee. You have to ask for it, but it's something important that you should discuss with them. What happens if I'm not happy? Because just redoing a treatment doesn't do much.
As we said earlier, you can do a lot of this stuff on your own. You just have to take a little time and make sure you're doing it properly when it comes to watering and mowing and that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially with things like fertilizing, it's something you can do on your own. You need to be careful that you don't apply too much because you can burn off your whole lawn. The same is true if you're adding, weed killers to your lawn. You can do this stuff yourself. You just have to kind of know when to do it and how much to apply. There's tons of websites that have recommendations on this. We have a lot of advice in our lawn care section at checkbook.org. But really the key thing is to mow properly. Most grasses should be mowed to between 2 and 2.5 inches to keep the blades that long or the grass that long. You want to make sure that your mower blades are sharp, so you're not just ripping the grass, that you're cutting it. But that's really key. If you're keeping the lawn at the right height, it'll naturally crowd out weeds and pests and remain healthy throughout the year without a lot of extra treatments.
And if you leave those clippings behind, that's natural fertilizer.
People, I think for the most part, have learned that it's best just to keep the clippings on the lawn, not to bag them up. By doing so, you'll need, as you said, less fertilization throughout the year, that you're leaving nutrients back into the soil.
So I live in a wooded area outside of Seattle, and when I moved into the house, the previous owner tried to have a lawn. in the front and the back, which, we had a lawn for about 2 months of the year, and the rest of the time it was dirt or moss. So I finally realized this is stupid to do this, and I put in ground cover. I now have vinca, which is not as aggressive as ivy in the front, and some pachysandra in other places. I have this green area, so they're all blooming right now with purple flowers and white flowers and everything, and I'm done with all the nonsense of trying to maintain a lawn. In some places, they just don't work. We have to think other than that green lawn that we see in all the suburbia pictures.
Yeah, I agree. And in some places like your lawn, you could have made it work, but you'd have had to cut out half your trees. Right. I mean, you'd have to take steps that just, don't make sense. I think also, in most of the U.S., turf grasses aren't naturally going to be there. I mean, they are in parts of the Northwest. They grow sod there, right? It's very common where I grew up in Kentucky to have lawns because everybody knows this is a bluegrass state. If you just had a natural environment, it would likely be a meadow where I grew up. And the same is true in Maryland and Virginia, where a lot of sod is grown. But in most of the country, turf grasses aren't a naturally occurring thing. And that's why people have to put a lot of effort into getting their lawns to grow. There are other options out there. I urge people to contact their cooperative extension offices, and master gardeners can help them, come up with other ways of, having a really pretty landscape without necessarily having to go with turf grasses.
So a lawn is one thing. Landscaping the yard and keeping it in top shape is a whole other project with a different set of contractors, and we're going to talk about that next. This is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Checkbook has consumer ratings and evaluations of lawn care services, lawn mowing services, landscapers, landscape designers, and garden centers in these 7 metro areas: Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. Ratings of local services are available with a subscription. If you live in one of these 7 areas and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Get a free 30-day subscription by going to checkbook.org/Consumerpedia.
So if you're planning to landscape your property, either update it or start from scratch, this is a project where you really need a plan and possibly someone to help you. So Kevin, let's talk about that. Where do we start?
The key is to think about and decide on a budget, because that will largely drive what you can do. If you only want to spend a few $1,000s, it's not going to go very far. It might redo some existing gardens and flower beds. You can do plantings and maybe a new design there, but it won't pay for a total redo of everything. It won't pay for hardscaping if you want a new patio, things like that. The good news is there are tons of resources that will help you plan. There are lots of magazines and gardening websites, and you can even just kind of, check out your neighbors to see what they're doing to get ideas.
Do you suggest hiring a company that specializes in landscape design?
Well, I think if you have a big project, it's wise to start with a designer. Know that if you do that, they might have companies they prefer to work with. And so you might have some constraints in terms of, shopping around to make sure you're not overpaying for the work itself. And some designers even work for landscaping companies themselves. And in that case, you're for sure going to be tying yourself into a specific company. Just like redoing a house, doing a house renovation, there are pros and cons to each type of relationship. But there are independent designers out there that will mark up and work up a design and then leave it to you to go find a company to work with. And that's often, for a lot of homeowners, the best arrangement.
And when I had some work done around the house, it's really the thought process of the person you're working with. My guy was great. You're in a wooded area. You want to keep it natural. We're not looking to do it something from modern home, some fancy modern home. We want to have it integrate with all the other stuff that's around and use natural and drought-resistant plants. A lot of it's the feel you get from talking to somebody when they come out to your house and get the different proposals.
Yeah, it's taking the person's temperature. It's just like trying to decide whether or not to hire a contractor to remodel your home. You need to make sure that the person listens to you and can communicate with you and understand what it is you're looking for, even though you might not be able to communicate that very well yourself, right? You might say, I'm not sure really what I want, but you might have, you have certain leanings in terms of what you like and don't like and how you want to interact with your yard, whether you want a patio for entertaining or not. These are important things, and it's clear from the ratings we get from our subscribers and others about landscape designers that some are better at communication and listening than others.
My guy said to me, and he was pretty honest, you want it to look like a parking lot or do you want it to look like your front yard?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Let's go with front yard. I like that a whole lot better.
And some people just want attractive, flower beds in their front yard, and that's it. And if that's all you want, then hopefully they're not going to recommend, $35,000 worth of hardscaping if you're not looking to make that kind of a dramatic shift.
And I think when you bring people in and get your different estimates, you should not only share what you're looking for or maybe some idea they have because they do this for a living, but give them an idea of what kind of money you can spend or no more than this amount so they can sort of plan according to your budget, right?
It's pretty important up front to think about, what you're willing to spend for this and really balance that against what kind of enjoyment you're going to get out of it. If you're not using your backyard right now because it's just not functional and you want to spend more time back there, then it might be worth spending a lot of money to get it into shape, get it to the point where you can enjoy it. If you're just looking to refresh the front of your home and make the flower beds look better, then you don't necessarily need to spend a ton of money to make that happen.
So let's talk about the payment structure. Should I plan to pay the whole thing up front? Will I be required to, or just give a deposit? How's that work with these folks?
It depends on your project and how much you're doing. I think that if you're starting with a designer, you might have to pay a design fee, and often you might have to pay 50% and then 50% when they're done. But in general, just think of this in terms of the less I pay up front, the more leverage I have later on to make sure that the work is being done to my satisfaction. And that's especially true for the landscaping companies themselves when they're doing the work. Yeah, you might have to put out some money up front for plants, but try to withhold as much payment as you can until the end. That means you get to say when the job is done and that you're happy and then willing to pay.
Before I hire a contractor for almost anything, I try to contact previous customers and take a look at some of the jobs. I would think with this, it's really important to maybe look at a couple of projects they've done and see how you feel about the final product.
Yeah, and the good news is you can actually see what this person's work looks like, right?
Yes.
And you can ask those customers, how's it holding up?
Right.
So ask for names of customers within the last year, but also ask for names of the customers within 5 years ago or so you can see how well the work held up.
So speaking of work holding up, plants die. Do you get any kind of guarantee with the landscaper?
Yeah, I think it's something to ask, right? If plants die too soon, will the company replace them for free? I think it's important to ask about guarantees, especially for hardscaping work. These projects should be rock solid. They should last for decades. Find out what guarantee you get against cracking and settling and things like that. A really difficult thing to do for a lot of hardscaping and wall building and patio projects is getting the drainage right so that things don't fall apart too soon.
So maybe you're like me and like to dig in the dirt and plant your own plants. Straight ahead, what Checkbook has learned about big box garden centers in terms of price, quality, and money-back guarantees. This is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. Grass is 3 times more productive at producing oxygen than trees. A lawn traps dust, prevents runoff, and helps cool down your yard. There are currently 3,000 registered varieties of tulips, which, by the way, can continue to grow as much as an inch per day after being cut.
We're talking to Kevin Brassler, the executive editor of checkbook.org. Kevin, I spend a lot of money on plants for the front of the house and the back deck, and I can tell you the prices and quality are really all over the place depending on where you go.
Yeah, I also spend a lot of money on plants. I don't actually plant them, but I know I spend a lot of money on this stuff every year.
Is that how the girls earn their allowance?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually. And there are big price differences from store to store. And the problem is, unlike just about all the topics we study here at Checkbook, we find that there is a price-quality relationship when it comes to buying plants. The companies that get the highest ratings for plant quality and customer service tend to charge higher prices. And the reason is that Home Depot and Lowe's charge really low prices for plants. Compared to most other chains and independents, they have very low prices. But on the other hand, they also get really low ratings from their customers that we survey for things like product quality, advice, and customer service. So the big chains just don't seem to have as high a buying standards as do others, especially independents. And they for sure, based on the survey data we see, don't have staff that can dispense great advice.
And sometimes at the big box store centers, I see plants that are totally dried out. If it looks horrible, walk away.
Fortunately, there are things you can do to inspect plants. We have lots of advice at checkbook.org in terms of selecting the best plants. And that's really important because it's not just the big chains, but a lot of independents also. Sometimes they're selling plants that are really unhealthy and they're going to die soon. And so you need to make sure that they've been, not just that they've selected the best plants to sell in terms of the buying standards, but that they've been well taken care of while they're sitting there waiting for someone to pick them out.
So here's what I do. I shop at a few different places. I just got my geraniums at a great price at Costco, and the quality there is always fabulous. My marigolds at Home Depot, because they're the cheap plants. And my really super duper plants, the ones that I want to attract the hummingbirds that are out on the back deck from the local nursery. I want to support them because they're local folks, and that's how I break my purchases up. I've done that for the last couple of years and had much better results.
Yeah, and I hear this a lot from our subscribers and consumers, that gardeners are shopping at more than one store these days. I know that we do that, or at least I've been told that we do that, that we might, for example, buy, annuals or plants that we don't really expect to stick around for very long at a big box store because they're really inexpensive there. But for shrubs and other perennials, especially plants that, the specimen itself is going to cost a lot of money. No, for those, we'll shop at an independent garden center, a garden nursery maybe, knowing that we might have to pay more, but that we'll get a better plant that will last longer.
Something a lot of people might not know is most big box garden centers and even nurseries offer a satisfaction guarantee with their plants. You kill them, you can bring them back?
Yeah, I'm always surprised by this, right? I mean, they're selling a living organism. Sometimes the garden center will do the planting, but usually it's left up to the homeowner to plant this stuff and then take care of it. They're selling living things, and then somehow if things go wrong, even if the customer's to blame, most of these garden centers will take back the thing and give you your money back. On the other hand, that means you have to dig stuff up and take it back in, right? That's not very convenient. Right. So you really want to start with they're selling good stuff. They're selling quality plants. But beyond that, do check the guarantee. Make sure that if things don't go well, that you can get your money back. Find out if you actually have to dig up everything to take it back in. And also find out especially what it is you're supposed to do to take care of this. Are there written instructions so that you don't forget what to do in terms of how to plant, whether to fertilize, how deep to plant, how to mulch, how much to water, and how often after you've put them into the ground?
Well, this has certainly been a lot of fun. And Kevin, I want to thank you for sharing your green thumb with our audience today.
Yeah, again, let's be careful out there. You might get your hands dirty and get blisters by digging and stooping and all that.
And if Kevin's daughters are listening, keep up the good work.
Yeah, they're doing a good job.
Well, that's it for this edition of Consumerpedia. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to us on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That way, you won't miss any episodes. Another way you can support this show is to follow us at Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, or at My Consumerpedia on Twitter. I'm Herb Weisbaum. Thank you for listening.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that empowers you, the consumer, to save money and make smarter choices. From auto repair shops to doctors, plumbers to vets, you can count on checkbook.org to help you find the best services and avoid the worst. Local ratings are unbiased and accurate. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/Consumerpedia. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.